If you imagine this is your car, then this is a motorcycle. Now, when you drive up to a main road, it's easy to see other cars. But because a motorcycle is a third of the width of a car, he's very hard to see. But he's dead easy to hurt. Nasty. And that's why, at junctions, I'm asking you to give a second thought for bikes. Stop. Think once for cars. Hold it. Then think again for bikes. If you want to avoid this, think once, think twice, think bike.
Well, I hope that grabbed your attention. I'm Oliver Colling, and this is my 70s TV childhood. Welcome back to my 70s TV childhood. For regular listeners, you'll recognise we had a slightly different start and also a big clue to what we'll be talking about in this edition. We are a podcast which celebrates growing up as a child in 1970s Britain and the big part that television played in our lives back then. Now I'm guessing that many of you recognised our opening sequence. It's Edward Judd warning us in graphic terms to make sure we watched out for motorbikes when we were driving in the well-known public information film. Now, we featured public information films in one of our very early episodes, way back in October 2020, if you can believe that. It's proved to be one of our most popular and most downloaded episodes, and it also provides a huge number of the memories and questions that we get here at My 70s TV Childhood from our listeners. So many of you have been in touch confirming how strongly you remember these short films that I thought it was well worth going back and looking at them again. If there's anything you'd like to see us look at in future episodes, or if you just want to share your memories with us and our audience, you can get in touch by leaving a comment on our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com or on one of our many social media pages. You can also email me, oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. But back to public information films. If you weren't around at the time or need a recap on these curiosities of British culture, then here we go. The public information film was an institution in the UK for over 60 years. A government agency, the sort of rather Orwellian titled Central Information Office, was responsible for commissioning and distributing the films until its closure in 2011. The Central Office of Information was established in 1946 when our then Prime Minister Clement Attlee announced that the wartime and I suspect genuinely Orwellian Ministry of Information would be closed down, but that official information services still had an important and permanent part in the machinery of government, and that the public should be adequately informed about the many matters in which government action directly impinges on their daily lives. The COI produced a wide range of information campaigns designed to inform the public on a huge range of issues which affected their daily lives, like health and welfare, education and social rights. These were groundbreaking projects and they have helped to shape attitudes and change public behaviour, as well as providing citizens with important information. The COI's vast archive of work is now available online via the British Film Institute and their BFI player. And these films provide unique historical insights into post-war British culture. So they were a fascinating group of films, generally very well made with good production values and sometimes featuring famous actors and celebrities. They were also often shocking and brutal in their messaging. And I'm sure I'm not the only person of a certain age who still has a sneaking feeling that if I ever go anywhere near a building site or a farmyard or, heaven forbid, a railway track, that I will most likely meet a gruesome fate, and either be hideously injured and disfigured, or meet a suitably horrible end. You even had to think twice before going anywhere near a road.
Emergency! Calling Green Cross Man! Green crosses never cross near parked cars, you blockhead!
Sorry, Green Cross.
Find a place where you can see both ways clearly. Great! You're well away from parked cars here. OK, now cross properly. Always use the Green Cross code, because I won't be there when you cross the road.
That was the famous Green Cross Man, played by Darth Vader Prowse, whose striking and tightly fitting costume made him not only popular with children, but also with the housewives of Britain, for reasons that I won't go into. Green Cross Man then had to say that he wouldn't be there when you crossed the road, because apparently, after some of the first adverts when he didn't say that, some young children had been running out into the road to try and summon up the hero to save them. Which doesn't sound very clever, does it? The messages contained in these films were sometimes extremely brutal and powerful. Like this one about fridges.
To you, it's just a worn-out fridge. But to a child, it's a caravan, a ship, a castle, even a bed. And a death trap, airtight and impossible to open from the inside. Don't let an old fridge be a new danger to children. Take off the door, or smash the lock, or better still, ask your local council to take it away or tell you how to dispose of it. Before it kills a child.
I don't think I ever saw an old fridge lying around when I was out playing with my friends, but it seemed like there was a national obsession with them, emphasised by the public information film. If I had ever come across an old fridge, I think I would have run a mile. Well, as long as I didn't have to run anywhere near the railway track. Now, I have mentioned the public information film The Finishing Line in a few previous episodes. I remember watching it at primary school, probably 1977, 1978, something like that. And I can truly say that I have to say most of my classmates at Padgate Church of England Primary School were left fairly traumatised as a result. The most likely place to meet a terrible end, according to the public information films, was the railway. All kinds of dire things happened to children who went anywhere near it. Do you remember the film Robbie, narrated by Peter Purvis, which we got shown at school? It featured a talented young footballer who met a grisly fate on the railway, which required both of his feet to be amputated. I remember the rather poignant closing shot of Robbie's football boots hanging up on his bedroom door, never to be used in anger again. Remember, kids, if you want to be a footballer, don't go anywhere near the railway, as it's hard to be a professional footballer without any feet. I'm surprised my generation ever used public transport. And of all of these films, the most disturbing one was The Finishing Line. As we all sat in the school hall, the lights dimmed and the projector whirred into action, and what we didn't realise was this was going to be followed by 20 minutes of absolute misery. The premise was that a school sports day was being held on the railway tracks, and over 4 or 5 sports day events, what seemed like scores of young children met horrific and bloody ends on the track. Unlike most of the other films of this kind, you weren't left imagining what had happened to the victims, and after lots of falls under trains, severed limbs, and a driver being hit with a brick, we were left with a line of bodies laid by the track. Now, I haven't seen this film end to end for over 40 years, but I still remember parts of it graphically. Did it work? I think it probably did, as I did have nightmares for a few weeks afterwards. But second to the railway for danger was the road. I'm amazed I even managed to cross the road before about the age of 10, given the dire warnings you'd hear every time you saw something on TV. We've already had in this episode motorcyclists mown down and Green Cross Man saving a young idiot from death. Nowhere was safe, I have to tell you, not even a town occupied entirely by furry animals.
One fine day, Tufty is playing on the grass with Bobby Brown Rabbit. But Harry Hare and Willy Weasel are playing out by the road, near the cars and buses. Poor Willy. The car has knocked him down. Very luckily, Mr. Policeman Badger comes along to help. "Oh, my word," says Policeman Badger. "You are both silly boys to play in the road. Now Willy's been hurt. He won't be able to play with you for a long time. Never play near the road."
You don't want to be like Willy Weasel, do you? Tufty and the Tufty Club ran in the UK from 1953, and millions of us over the years joined the Tufty Club, often through events at school, and, as in my case, events run by what I guess was the equivalent then of community police officers. Tufty's popularity is slightly hard to explain in the context of today's society, but back then, he was a simple, good little squirrel who wanted to be safe crossing the road, as we all did. There were lots of bad things out in the world, as we saw in many of the horrific public information films already referred to, but Tufty was a representative of a simpler time, when I guess we didn't mind too much being told what to do. And it wasn't just kids who were told what to do. Here's a message from Jimmy Savile aimed at women drivers.
It's very likely that 400 of you will be injured in your cars tomorrow. You'll be within 6 miles of home and doing less than 30. And it's going to happen to a lot of you ladies. You'll be shopping, collecting the kids, going to the laundrette. For some of you, the face you start out with in the morning won't be the same face you end up with by the evening. Why let it happen? Clunk, click, it's so simple. Clunk the car door, click the seatbelt, even if you are just going around the corner, clunk, click every trip.
So, it's more likely to be women drivers who spoil their lovely looks by being distracted by shopping and managing the children or by fluffy kittens or something. It's quite hard to believe that government-sponsored advice was delivered in terms like this, even in the 1970s. Stratford Johns, who was famous for his TV roles as a wise police officer, had a very firm message, but this time it was aimed firmly at men who'd had a drink or two after a hard day at work.
Ever seen a driver blow in the bag? It's getting to be a far more familiar sight than it used to be. Over 2,000 drivers are breathalyzed every week. Look at this chap. Had a marvellous time. Didn't think for 1 second, now I'm not fit to drive. Then he makes a stupid mistake. Didn't think he'd ever be stopped and have to blow in the bag. We didn't consider himself a criminal. He'd only had a couple of drinks. But he'll lose his license. And unfortunately, his wife can't drive. But he was one of the lucky ones. Last December, a quarter of all the drivers killed were known to be over the limit. Last year, there were nearly 40,000 convictions. Make sure you're not added to this year's total. Drinking and driving. It's just not worth it.
Before we leave the road and its endless sources of death and serious injury, here's a public information film which I remember vividly. It wasn't frightening, but it was clever and its message came across loud and clear. I remember almost every word of it, even today.
That's the key. This is my dad. That's my sister. This is my mum and my nan. She always waits there. She worries when we're not all home. Mum and Dad worry when I am. Mind you don't burn yourself. Dry yourself properly. You'll ruin your eyes. And every Saturday morning when me and Mum go shopping, my nan always tells me to look out for the traffic. Me! It's Mum she should be telling. When she wants to get to the shop opposite, she just takes off. She doesn't bother with the crossing. We've been told at school not to go between parked cars, but to use the crossings. And my mum says that's quite right when you're young. At home there's all that sit up and eat up, otherwise you won't grow up to be big and strong and healthy. And outside, where there are cars and lorries and buses wagging past, my mum should be wearing L plates crossing the road. Good job she doesn't drive. My dad does, and he's very careful, but he doesn't always practice what he preaches. Me and him had been up in the park Sunday morning. Then he remembered we hadn't bought the car. I started walking to the subway, and he tells me to make us late for our dinner. It's very funny how grown-ups can always be right, even when they're wrong. Now, if anybody had tried that when he'd been driving, he'd have done his nut. The best, though, was when I was with Mum. Me and her were on our way home after getting me more shoes. Anyway, we have to cross the road, and she didn't even see the car coming. She was about to tell the driver what she thought about him, and he was out the car to do the same. And you know who he was? My dad! In our new car. We could have all finished up as mincemeat. And you tell me how they would have explained that to my nan.
So, if we avoided the roads and the railways, were we safe? I'm afraid not. Danger lurked around every corner. Even at home, where we were bombarded with films about what to do if your pipework leaks, how to avoid killing yourself with your paraffin heater, and why it was important not to chain smoke in bed, because, not unsurprisingly, if you did, you were likely to burn your house down. Oh, and don't forget to keep an eye on your chip pan before it bursts into flames. 1970s Britain did seem to be a very dangerous place, with death and disaster looming everywhere. But amongst the shock tactics and the clever productions, there were some serious messages. Like this one, from a little boy and his best friend.
Charlie and I were out the back when Vera and Dave came by and said, "Come along for a picnic." And I was going, but Charlie said, he says I better tell Mum where I'm going. So we told him to wait while we went and asked. But Mum was talking to the milkman. And she talked such a long time that when I had asked her and she'd said yes, the others had gone. Mum asked us why we hadn't gone, and when I told her, she said we'd been good for not going, and would we like a day out with her instead? Charley says, always tell your mummy before you go off somewhere so she knows who you are with.
These animated films were revolutionary in that they dealt with some pretty heavy subject matter, ranging from playing with matches to child abduction in a realistic and sensitive way. Well, notwithstanding the talking cat, of course. Charlie the cat was full of advice. Whatever the situation, Charlie was able to say just the right thing.
Charlie and I were in the park. Then this man came up and said, "Would I like to see some puppies?" And I said yes. And I was going to go, but Charlie stopped me. Charlie's reminded me, my mum says I shouldn't go off with people I don't know. Then the man went away. We went and told Mummy, and she said we'd been very good. I got an apple and Charlie got something he likes. He says never go anywhere with men or ladies you don't know.
Once again, those messages were so powerfully put across that I still remember them today. As mentioned earlier, there were hundreds of these cinematic gems produced, and the British Film Institute does have many of them online to watch, and I do think they were incredibly powerful. And I'm sure many of you remember the ones we've mentioned, and countless other ones too. We could go on for hours with more examples, but I'm not sure that would help my listener numbers. But please indulge me in remembering just a few more of my favourites before we close. Firstly, there were lots of films about the dangers of water, most notably the legendary Dark Water film.
I am the spirit of dark and lonely water, ready to trap the unwary, the show-off, the fool. And this is the kind of place you'd expect to find me. But no one expects to find me here. It seems too ordinary. But that pool is deep. The boy is showing off. The bank is slippery. The show-offs are easy. But the unwary ones are easier still. This branch is weak, rotten. It'll never take his weight. Only a fool would ignore this. But there's one born every minute. Under the water there are traps. Old cars, bedsteads, weeds, hidden depths. It's the perfect place for an accident.
Oh, look, there's someone in the water. Quick, use that big stick to get him out.
Sensible children. I have no power over them.
Oi, mate, that's a stupid place to swim. Hey, go over and get that feel? You don't have to feel cold, mate. How long was you in there? Ew, thing.
I'll be back.
And so as a counterbalance to that, what should we do? Well, we should learn to swim, of course. Not only will that help save our lives, but it would also make us irresistible to women as well.
This is me, thinking as usual about Dave. Dave is super. Dave can do anything. Oh, he's great. He really is. When pow, up pops my fairy godmother with a "I'll give you 3 wishes" routine. Wish number 1 is easy. Next, I wish we were both at the seaside. Come on, Dave, let's swim, I say. It's just not my scene, man, says Dave. What he really meant was he couldn't swim. I've still got 1 wish left, remember? Meet Mike. He swims like a fish.
Yes, I wish I didn't keep losing me birds. Then learn to swim, young man. Learn to swim.
If you can't swim, ask about lessons at your local swimming baths. Do learn to swim. It could save your life.
There you go, Dave. If you want a nice bird, then learn to swim. And we also had the message backed up by Britain's most famous Australian import of the 1970s.
Those of you who can't swim yet, then if you just wait over in the shallow for me. Kids and water, they love it. Rivers, canals, even the lily pond in the garden. You can't keep them away from it.
Water has a fascination for children. And I should know. When I was 3 years old, I fell in the river at our place. Couldn't swim. Somehow managed to scrabble my way to the bank. Frightened the wits out of my mum and dad. And you can bet they had me taught to swim very soon after that. But some children aren't quite so lucky. And if they can't swim and they go off by themselves to play by the side of some water somewhere, you know only too well what might happen. That's why I had my little girl taught to swim as soon as possible. So have your children taught to swim. They're never too young to start, and once they get that confidence in the water, they love it. Ask at your local swimming pool.
All right?
Or if you can swim yourself, why not teach them yourself? It's fun. See?
I was always amazed by how few older people knew how to swim when I was a child. My parents and lots of others had never learned, never been taught. So I'm glad Rolf & Co made sure that we in future generations were capable of saving ourselves from dire situations in the water. Many of the public information films we enjoyed were, I realise now, trying to make us conform to certain behaviours and values, as well as keeping us safe. And it is a little bit Orwellian, as I mentioned earlier. Even A Trip to the Countryside was bound by the country code, which I bet lots of you can still recite, having had it drilled home by many reminders seen on the television. But in spite of this, and all the public information films on the subject, there was one couple in the UK who seemed oblivious to what sort of behaviour was acceptable in the countryside.
Oh, Joe, I have enjoyed our country walk.
Yes, we've come a long way, Petunia. Look, you can see our tracks right across that yellow cornfield.
Oh, yes. It's ever so nice in this field, but I'm glad those cows have gone.
Ah, they're taking themselves off for a walk down the road. Look, through that gate I opened. The one marked private.
Oh, yes. Our little Bingo's having a lovely time playing with those sheep. The exercise will do him good.
Hey, I bet that bottle, Petunia. It smashed up a tree.
Oh, very clever.
But you know, there's a farmer down there with a purple face.
I expect it's all that sun and the open-air life, Joe.
Now he's doing one of those country dances.
Well, I don't think he looks very friendly.
Maybe you're right. There can't be anything we've done.
No. But I won't stay where I'm not wanted. Come on, Joe.
When folk come out to the country, why, oh, why won't they follow the country code?
Joe and Petunia were a grotesque caricature of British ignorance, and starred in a whole range of public information films in the 1970s. Selfish, self-centred, and entirely unaware of the impact their actions had on others, they provided an amusing but powerful method of telling us all what was right and telling us what was wrong. And I'm sure many of you remember some of their antics even today. So that's another quick look back at public information films, a staple part of 1970s TV watching. I used to love watching them, as they were generally really good and well made, even if some of them did frighten the bejesus out of a whole generation of young children who still won't go anywhere near an electricity substation, a pylon, or a railway track without fearing instant death. Well done the UK government for creating a generation of compliant, although slightly traumatised people who won't ever cross the road from behind a parked car. That's all we have time for on this episode. Let me have your memories of public information films by leaving a comment on our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com or on one of our social media pages. Alternatively, drop a line to oliver@my70stvchildhood.com. Join us again next week for our 70s TV-related trivia quiz, and in a fortnight for our next podcast. Don't have nightmares, but if you are watching television and you don't have a television licence, then be very, very afraid. Detective vans are operating in your area.
Yes, there's a TV set on number 5. It's in the front room. And they're watching Columbo.
If you don't have a TV licence, it won't take us long to find you.
I think we were fairly easily fooled. But it wasn't any the worse for that. Thanks for listening, and see you again soon for more from My 70s TV Childhood.